Hello and welcome to Equinoxx, a podcast where I talk about my own feelings about current social events as well as using sociological knowledge trying to understand the world around us. My name is Knox. Welcome to the Galactic Public Library. If this is your first time here, welcome, and hopefully today's episode will be useful to you in understanding about the world as as well as dealing with societal issues as a whole. This is the first episode of the podcast. This will be a monthly podcast where it is updated monthly. Hopefully, I'll get it out in the first half of the month, but given this is the first episode, it did took me extra amount of time to edit as well as to make sure the quality is good. So this is why this has been out a little bit late. But still, hopefully, if you enjoy it, please leave a like, subscribe, or comment. If you do have anything you want to say that you want to improve the podcast, do also let me know as well. For this very first episode, I want to take time to talk about some of the most important things that happened during the political landscape for the past, let's say, 2 months. I'm going to talk about the Trump administration as well as the general sentiment of political depression, as well as how to deal with political depression as a whole. So, if you have been following the political news basically for more than a year, or like for the past year, for like the past 6 months, or even just the past 2 months, there are many things that have happened, and a lot of things will probably still happen given the trajectory of what is happening right now. This basically happened from the moment kind of Trump was even confirmed as the running candidate to the Republican Party and until now. Even from the very early stage, there is kind of a perpetual fear for Trump when he basically announced that he will be running overall. It kind of both stemmed from his presidency. The first 4 years has been, in a lot of ways, nightmares for a lot of people. But also the fact that he never kind of leave this public sphere, even during the Biden administration. A lot of the political talk are surrounding him as a person, right? Whether or not he actually stole the files into Mar-a-Lago, whether or not he is actually should be punished because of January 6th incarceration, and so on. And during his time last year, even though his first 4 years weren't really great, the last year has been extreme in him deciding to running on a platform that based on a lot of anti-trans, anti-immigration, racist, and sort of a lot of, in a way, discriminatory platform in the first place. He kind of plays into a lot of voters' discriminatory tendencies in general. And ever since he has been elected a president again, there has been a surge of individuals who are worried about the future, particularly amongst the minority youth. There has been evidence that's shown that there is a significant increase over LGBTQ hotline, for example, and sort of the intersectionality makes things worse, right? So if you're a queer black person living in America, the situation is almost certainly going to be worse for you because you're not only vulnerable in the front of your gender identity, but also your racial identity as well, and so on. And what's important to note here is that it doesn't only affect people in America, but in a lot of ways, it actually affects individuals who live elsewhere as well. So, for example, right, if you have been following UK political news as well, a reform is being increasingly popular amongst the UK citizens, leading to a significant rise in outright voters in UK as well. I'm also significantly affected as a queer individual of color, even though I don't live in US, but just by the sheer amount of tragic stories and news I've heard for the past years, both for people that are very distant from me to even some of the people that are very close to me that share the same identity, that share the same community with me, a lot of them, I've heard a lot of horrible news about them as well. And even right now, Trump administration has been signaling their stance on cultural issues a lot through kind of things such as removing resources that are dedicated towards LGBTQ individuals, as well as things such as HIV resources and so on. The Trump administration, beyond that, has already starting to pass policies or administrative orders that actively harms the vulnerable individual's sustainability by targeting people that are trans, for example, trans soldiers, as well as a lot of the legal immigrants as well. That harm is not only speculative, with a lot of criticism saying, well, what can Trump actually do, right? Sometimes he just says stuff. The harm is not only speculative, and also it's not Trump just only says stuff, but it's also very tangible and actively harming people's life as a whole. So this is why there is a overall sense of overwhelming negativity in relation to a lot of political issues right now. This is because a lot of times, from evolution psychology's perspective, there is an increased amount of negative news we can see today compared to back then. And you don't have to know about, for example, Palestine, right? It will be a place that you never heard of, you never seen people there, you probably never interact with the person if it's like people who live there, if it's like 2,000 years ago when there's no social media. You don't have to listen or look at their sufferings like 24/7 in general. And oftentimes, this results in a lot of individuals turning into a sort of a belief that nothing really matters, as well as there's sort of nihilism and also determinism that nothing they do will actually change the course, and nothing is really worth fighting anymore in general, because there is simply no use in actually fighting against the system. This belief, sort of like this belief system, has significantly been in surge since Trump has been in office, especially since many of us has actively fought against him by actively participating in a lot of the political discourses online. It is sort of easy to feel that the effort you have done has made sort of no progress at all, and even worse, the world is sort of standing against you and your ideals and beliefs, or even your own survival a lot of time. So therefore, in a lot of way, there is an existential dread that caused by Trump's policies and words, as well as dealing with an increased level of bigotry and discrimination, sort of almost on a daily level right now. And for a lot of people who are in minority communities, we are constantly sort of in this survival mode, and people in survival mode often comes with an increased level of mental issues because we feel an extra amount of depression as well as anxiety and so on. This affects that belongs to minority communities even more, when even if like nothing in their life has technically changed, like for example for me, I still have my job, I still go to my job and so on. Nothing technically happened for me yet, but even the feeling of like there in some day the change might happen, and there might be something happen to me. For example, this YouTube channel might get banned because of my video essays. These things does makes me feel very dreaded, as well as not so certain about the future in general. What's so sad about this is that there is an increase. This is also increasingly observable amongst the teenagers in society today, as they increasingly sort of participate in this online political discourse, if you look at Reddit, if you look at Tumblr, if you look at even X or Blue Sky, there is a lot of participation from the youth in online discourse. But for a lot of them, they actively feel powerless because they don't have the votes to actually change any situation, but also at the same time, they were sort of like influenced by many other adults with various intentions that sometimes for them is very overwhelming as well, and it can easily lead to like this oversensitized version of themselves where they feel like nothing really matters because everything seems so important. This causes people to sort of disengage with the political system as well and seek alternative means or vigilante justice. So, political depression ultimately is a sign of a broken political system where people do not have room for proper discussion, or they feel the proper discussion and engagement doesn't do anything. And there is a sign that people do not have the power, doesn't have the actual ability to enact what they want or negotiate with the government even, or negotiate with the powerful individuals or companies and so on. This is why we have Luigi Mangione, who is so celebrated, not because of his action of killing someone, but the fact that the person who he kills is the representation of this big institution that no one else can negotiate and constantly exploits them. This is sort of a sign of this is the only rational way of taking down this institution that is actively trying to harm millions and billions of people. This is why there is so much vigilante justice, is also because people actively disengage with the political system because they feel like they are powerless. There is a general sentiment that they cannot do anything in general. That is also why many other people sort of in today's society that in the past we would look at them as lunatics, but right now we hail them as either heroes or supervillains in the first place. There is sort of this is sort of a bipartisan issue in the sense that a lot of the right wing leaning individuals also feel political depression to a lot of extent. There is a reason that a lot of the conventional Republican or right-wing politicians are losing out to figures such as Trump, such as Farage on the right, is also because a lot of people seek sort of political outsider to change society. The fact that Trump is running on Make America Great Again, right? The whole idea is that he is a political outsider and he can actually change what's corrupt from the inside. So there is a lot of political depression there is a lot of dissatisfaction about whatever they believe the establishment is, right? The difference is in the perception of what is currently controlling the government, was either perceiving society as sort of a systemic system that is built for oppression against minorities, or the system is now sort of being co-opted by minorities, with both sides recognizing that what happens right now, or what happens in the status quo, is low-key failing. Now, I'm not gonna pass a moral judgment to say which is true, because to a certain extent both are true, but I think from more progressive lens of it, we believe in a world that is more cooperative. We're in a more conservative lens, right? If you're regressive, almost, you believe in a world where people have to sort of fight for food, right? You believe in the power of competition, especially free market competition, that makes people fight for what they want. At the end of the day, I would not pass on moral judgment of which belief system you believe is legit, but for me personally, I don't think everyone will be successful in a world where there's only competition and there's no cooperation at all. And I do believe passing on sympathy towards a lot of minorities and helping them when they couldn't reasonably have the ability to compete is also extending sympathy to, in a lot of situations, none of us are majority like 100% of time. It's also extending sympathy to the future us, or the current moment us, or the past us that's, that may need help and not necessarily need other people to say that you're a failure in general. So from that perspective, my opinion is clear. I do sort of believe, even with all these political depression going on, at the end of the day, I think the states failed more in ways of, you aren't actually helping people as much as you can, rather than the state is not facilitating the free market competition correctly at the moment. I feel like the state failed more in the cooperation regard rather than competition regard. But that aside, in some respects, the solution towards sort of political depression is by buying into this sort of evolution psychology framing, that trying to shut down and sort of get desensitized to some negative news and disengage with the system is sometimes helpful in ways that, especially if you already done enough regarding the situation at hand and you feel like you couldn't possibly do much more, right? For example, if you donate to Palestine almost monthly, if you already did a lot of volunteer work in local communities, a lot of times if you watching news and feel depressed, that just backstab you and make you feel bad for not able to do anything. So under these instances, I do think to some extent we do need to be more realistic. In some ways, we do need to touch the grass more in a way that's, engage more with actual local communities and stop engaging with all the things online that you have no control of. But I do also think it does run into the risk of being sort of apathetic towards other people's suffering and falls into political apathy in general, which does not have much difference with sort of political depression in the first place. Maybe you'll feel a little bit better, a little less anxious in general, but it doesn't change the fact that we're still living in a system where nobody actually is satisfied in the first place. And to me, the way to actually solve political depression, or at least how I deal with political depression, is that first, I just recognize that the feeling of depression is normal and okay, especially at a time where society is at a turmoil, right? It is super unstable. Nobody knows what's going on. We may have the second version of the Cold War, or even sometimes the feeling of World War III is near, right? With all the conflicts in the world, for example, Ukraine versus Russia. We also have, right, Israel versus Palestine. A lot of these conflicts going on that makes people feel like they couldn't do anything, and this is normal because everyone wants to feel powerful, and when you feel that you don't have enough power to make everything change the way you want, it is okay to feel a little bit depressed. It's okay to feel a little bit anxious as well. And to me, realizing that depression is a legit feeling of sadness, is a natural condition to having some sort of empathy towards others. And I think realizing that is normal and okay, and you don't have to be happy like 100% of the time, is the first step in stopping a lot of deterioration of mental health in the first place. And we should recognize that there are still many progresses that we have made for the past few years, and especially decades, right? The larger trend does show that the world is a better place rather than a worse place. And before, we don't have gay marriage in almost any country, and now we have many countries that have passed gay marriage, and gay marriage is becoming less and less controversial issues going on. And there's like the women generally earns more, even though there's still gender pay gap, but the pay gap is way much less than like 50 or 60 years ago. A lot of these things do still show that the world is a better place to live in for a lot of people. And we should recognize that in a lot of ways, the societal progression or like the progression towards culture is never linear, and there is all to be some sort of setbacks, right? There are many setback periods that historically has happened, and we are inevitably finding ourselves in this current moment at a period where there is just setbacks. And the fact that we are even though we are experiencing the rise of Nazism again, at no point of time that we or individuals on the far right actually receive the same amount of approval rate as many of the Nazi leaders actually once did in 1920s or 30s. I think it shows something. I think it shows that Nazism is not as popular as maybe the Twitter would like you to think. And also, there is a lot of heavy backlash against the rise of Nazism that shows we still made a lot of progress, right? There's the Trump's approval rating is still very much bad, and Elon Musk, who did the Nazi salute, still get the Tesla stocks dumped in general. So we are still making progress, and people are still more vigilant towards a lot of these things in general. So we shouldn't. So we are still making progress, at least on a comparative level, compared to, like, say, the last time this happened. So even if we're in a setback period, the setback isn't as strong as we are thinking likely. But also, so beyond recognizing that, even though cliche, I do think for a lot of us, we need to stop scrolling at our phone and start small and trying to take care of individuals that is surrounding us and people in the community that we actually care about. And we need to participate in discussion at spaces where we don't have to feel angry or feel constantly attacked in the first place. And we should try to participate more in a lot of local government and issues, because for a lot of local government issues, the turnout is not that great, and they are often the places that, even though the turnout is not great, it affects you as a local resident, your life more. Sometimes maybe you and a few of your friends started voting, you guys could actually become the turning point for certain policies to be passed or not passed. A lot of these local government issues and meetings are the places where changes are probably easy to get, but also working with local organizations and so on probably also directly help you engage with people in need as well, more than a lot of things that are on the national level, which seem too big, and even if you participate in it, you feel too small to actually do anything in the first place. And when feeling depressed, do not hesitate to reach out for help. There is a general stigma around mental health still, even though we come from a long way since COVID, where everyone at least recognized mental health is a problem. The act of even reaching help could not only save you and make you feel better, because we are all connected and we are all supposed to help each other. So hit up your friends or families and so on, but also because sometimes you have a role model effect that encourage other individuals to speak out their struggles and stories. A lot of times these struggles and stories are important because it helps people, as they're verbalizing or as they're thinking through these stories, realizing what is the problem, right? What is the problem of their life and how should they go about and solve them. So a lot of time sharing stories is, even if you share your struggle, a lot of time it is beyond just saving yourself and make your life better. It is also a connecting opportunity between you and a lot of other people that maybe if they see you, there's a role model effect of allowing them to share more stories as well. And I do think we should also conserve our energy and be smart about fighting the bigotry and discrimination. A lot of times I see people fighting online with a lot of conservatives, and I think while that is legit, but a lot of times that doesn't really do much beyond like you yourself feel good. And sometimes I think it goes a little bit too far in the sense of like directing hate towards these people are not the best way to deal with your anger in a lot of ways, but also at the same time, it directs your attention away from doing actual things that can actually change you and others' life, because these people thousands of miles away, you don't even know where they live and so on, doesn't necessarily hurt you in any couldn't possibly hurt you in a lot of meaningful ways in the first place, at least materialistically. So therefore, I think we need to conserve our energy and put it into places that actually are needed. Commented on posts that actually spread awareness towards problems. Commented on posts that actually may be super problematic and call out important people for them. And sometimes I know that the direct engagement might be risky for a lot of people. This is why a lot of people turn to online. If direct engagement is sort of risky, it is okay to not do so and not feel bad about yourself, because safety is the first principle in fighting against any kind of discrimination or any kind of bigotry or any kind of like cultural backlash in the first place. Because remember that your existence is already sort of a rebellion towards the system that are designed to go against your interest and to make you not be who you are and try to make you to assimilate into the greater culture that there are. So sometimes just remember that your existence, if you're a queer person, if you're a black person, if you're a other kind of racial minorities, if you are a trans person and so on, for a lot of these, even your existence is a rebellion towards the system that wants you gone. And any additional progress that you're able to make are just extra things that you can do to actually make the world a better place. At the same time, I would say also try to engage less in the content that is kind of designed to be satire but without any actual educational value. I know it sometimes fulfill this short-term need of dopamine of like, oh, it feels great in a very short amount of time. But after dopamine has passed, it's very easy to crash down to a place where you feel like, wow, a lot of other people are just idiots who are still in control of the world where you cannot do anything. And I think that makes you feel worse in the long term when you inevitably feel like you're powerless against a lot of these people as well. So I would say try to stay at least somewhat compassionate as much as possible. This is not to say that you must understand and sort of forgive the people who actually hurt you, but at least try to understand sort of where they're coming from and know what we should do to prevent individuals becoming like them, right? We should realize that toxic masculinity, right? You don't have to forgive people who push past toxic masculinity on you, but it's important to sympathize with them still, to understand where they're coming from and tell us how could we prevent our children or prevent other individuals from falling into the same trap as well. And always remember that humans are sort of complex. Even if you disagree with them on certain ideas, it doesn't mean that you don't have a common ground with them, or even like you cannot reach any sort of political agreements with them as well. And never lose the desire to sort of learn more about the society and structure functions through a lot of reading books and engaging in like fruitful discussions with people that you trust. And very last thing I think I'm gonna say is never lose hope. Pessimism is okay, and personally I'm pessimistic a lot of times, but we should believe the world at least can be a better place, even if it don't always will be. At least believe there is a possible world out of all the parallel universe, that this might be a good world that we live in. That is all I have for today. Again, hopefully you have enjoyed this podcast. If you like this podcast, comment, like, and subscribe. If you have any new ideas, if you have any topic you want me to talk about next, more than free to do so. But otherwise, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next month.